Coming up in today's edition of Locked On Eagles, a complete 2023 NFL Draft preview with the host of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast, Damian Parson.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Thursday edition of the show. It's brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Really excited about today's show. In segments 2 and 3, the host of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast, Damian Parson, also of the Draft Network. He's going to join me to talk about everything you need to know about the NFL Draft in 2023, which is just exactly now 2 weeks away. In 2 weeks, Gino and I will be getting ready for our live show, which will be starting. I'm recording here at 5 o'clock. We'll be starting up live at 6:30, so we'd have an hour left before the show. So excited. Damian's going to hop on, talk to me about the strengths of this class, the weaknesses, where he thinks the Eagles are going to go with the 10th pick, with the 30th pick, trades, where he thinks quarterbacks are going to go, my guys he's not sold on. A full-blown 2023 preview coming your way on today's edition of Locked On Eagles. And I started to think, in part of me getting Damian on, I wanted to know what he thought about this class compared to the ones in the past, because Gino and I were doing our My Guys show the other day, and I'm not going to lie, there's some guys I love. I really like Nolan Smith. I really like Emmanuel Forbes. I love the idea of Myles Murphy. I think Antonio Johnson at safety is great. There's some later guys like Tajay Spears at running back, Darnell Washington at tight end that I would consider my guys, but I just don't. And maybe part of it is it's a weaker class at some positions. Maybe part of it is the Eagles are a Super Bowl contender with a pretty set roster and they have a franchise quarterback. So maybe this draft doesn't feel as urgent to me, that I don't feel as passionate about these prospects. Not to mention, I was covering the Super Bowl. I had a lot of draft knowledge, throughout the offseason, but not going to lie, up until March, I was covering the Eagles Super Bowl run. So wasn't really thinking draft outside of the last 8 weeks. So for all those reasons, I just didn't feel strong about my guys that I was picking and this class overall. Not that I'm not equally as excited to get this draft going in 2 weeks as I have been in the past. When you have 2 first-round selections, it's always fun. And we know the opportunity here for the Eagles can be to extend this window with some more long-term core pieces. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a combination of all of that. I wondered, is this class stronger than I think? And those factors are kind of tapping into my bias, or is it truly a weaker class at a lot of positions? So I want to talk to Damian about that. But I think overall, it is weaker at some spots. I think number 1, wide receiver, don't love it this year. And the good news is this is the first time in a long time the Eagles are not going to, I at least think they're not going to consider a receiver with one of their picks in the first 2 rounds, because they have A.J. Brown now and Devontae Smith. They finally got that position right. But wide receiver, I don't think there's a true wide receiver 1 in this class. I really like Jackson Smith and Jigba, but that's really it. I like Jordan Addison and Zay Flowers at a lower first-round level, but I don't think they're kind of up to snuff with the past top-tier prospects at receiver in past classes. I think you look at safety too. Daniel Jeremiah said this, and I totally agreed. After Brian Branch and Antonio Johnson, and then you could say Jordan Battle of Alabama, it's really just the 2 Bama safeties, Branch and Battle, and it's Antonio Johnson from Texas A&M. After that, and I'll throw Sidney Brown in there too from Illinois. I think he's worthy of being in that top tier. After those 4 safeties, there is a significant drop-off. At running back, I don't think it's that great of a running back class. Linebacker, not overly impressed with a lot of the linebacker prospects compared to past classes. So I don't think it's as strong in some areas, but I will say there are some spots too where the Eagles could consider waiting and finding some really good value. Like you look at the edge spot, you look at who you could get in the 30th overall spot or the 62 overall pick in round 2, even that 3rd round selection. I think edge rusher is deep. I think cornerback is also deep. I think you look at the offensive line, there's a lot of versatile pieces that I like. So there are some areas of strength, and I think the Eagles could consider waiting. This is the thing. Teams don't just draft for need. They don't just draft for best player available. They don't just draft by position. It's all of these things that go hand in hand. They all go together to create your decision of who you draft. But another thing that does go into it is the strength of the class at certain positions. For instance, let's say you have an edge rusher. Like, let's say you might have Myles Murphy. He's 2 spots ahead of, let's say, Joey Porter Jr. at cornerback, or that's a deep class. So let's use a thinner position. Let's say defensive tackle. Let's say you have Myles Murphy 2 spots ahead of Kalijah Kancey, Pittsburgh's defensive tackle. So Murphy is 2 spots higher on your board, but you look at defensive tackle and you look at edge and you say, yeah, I like Myles Murphy a lot, but hey, if I wait on edge and I come back around at 30 to take one or at 62, I can get a Felix Anudike-Uzomah and be very happy. I could get a Will McDonald. I could get a Tamiwa. I'm always going to say his name wrong. Adetomiwa Adebawor. You can get a Deion White from Georgia Tech, or you can get Ojulari from LSU. Whereas with defensive tackle, yeah, Kancey might be a few spots lower than Murphy on our board, but after you look at Breezy, you look at Kancey, you look at, of course, at the top, Jalen Carter. After that, those 3 guys, it's kind of a drop off at defensive tackle. So that also goes into your decision of who you pick is also the strength of these classes. Like cornerback, if you're trying to decide between Brian Branch at safety or Joey Porter, let's say you move down from 10 to 14 or 15, and you're deciding between Brian Branch and Joey Porter. You could say, well, we could take Porter here. Maybe he's ranked higher than Branch, but we could get Emmanuel Forbes. We can come back around in round 2 and, get a Cam Smith from South Carolina or a Kelly Ringo from Georgia. Whereas if we don't take Brian Branch now and we try to get a safety with one of those later picks, like let's say we try to get him at 62, I would say Antonio Johnson's probably off the board. And then you got to hope maybe Sidney Brown or Jordan Battle are there. And then you got to ask yourself, do you like those guys as much? Are they worth that pick? So that's another thing that definitely goes into Howie Roseman's decisions. It's why it drives me crazy when people always have this black and white perspective about how to go about your draft philosophy. Like you always just take best player available. That's not true. Regardless of position, that's not true. Regardless of need, short-term and long-term, that's just not the case. You don't just draft for need either. You don't just draft for what you need on the roster right now. You don't just draft a lineman because they're a lineman and it's a valuable position. All of these factors go into one big decision. It's a giant umbrella with all of these things contextualizing that decision. And I think a strength of a class definitely goes into it. So I'm not saying the Eagles won't take Nolan Smith at 10th overall because edge rusher is deeper. So I'm not saying they'll take, let's say Kancey over a Nolan Smith. I'm not saying they would take a Brian Branch over a Devin Witherspoon because cornerback is deeper. Still in these classes, but at the same time, I do think it goes into the equation. And I do think this year there are some positions that are definitely weaker than other years, and there's some spots that are stronger. I think that's how it works pretty much every season. But I want to hear from Damian. I want to know what he thinks of this class, the strengths, the weaknesses, who his guys are, who he's out on, all that and more coming up next with the host of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast and of the Draft Network, Damian Parson. Don't go anywhere, guys. This is the Locked On Eagles podcast, and it's sponsored today by Built Bar. We've been telling you guys about Built Bar for years because it is the best tasting protein bar on the planet. Looking for a delicious snack, but don't want all the sugar and calories? Then you need the best tasting protein bar ever, Built Bar. You got to try them. If you're like me, you want a healthier snack, but you don't want to sacrifice the flavor of a normal candy bar. I love a good Reese's cup or a good cookies and cream Hershey bar or, something with coconut in it. That's what you get with Built Bar. They're covered in 100% real chocolate. So you're not sacrificing taste, but you are also getting some amazing macros. You're getting only 130 calories in these bars, only 4 grams of sugar, a whopping 17 grams of protein. And like I said, they're delicious. They come in so many flavors. Churro. I love peanut butter brownie. Cookies and cream is a go-to of my brother Joe, who's the host of the Locked On Sabres podcast. He's ordering Built Bars for him and his wife pretty much on the daily, or I should say bi-weekly. Like he is every month got a couple boxes that are coming in. You can always get them at built.com, but now you can also get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. while you still can. Get your specialty flavors at Built.com. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate bar, or coconut puff. If you're close to a Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter puff and churro puff. You can thank me later. And if you're at home and just chilling and you don't want to get up, you can order them at Built.com. We thank Built Bar for sponsoring the Locked On Eagles podcast today. All right, everybody, thanks for making us a part of your day. It's the Locked On Eagles podcast. Shout out to the everydayers for making Locked On Eagles your first listen every day. Really excited about our guest on today's show to help me preview the 2023 NFL Draft, which, crazy enough, is only 2 weeks away. Feels like I just got done covering the Super Bowl loss for the Eagles. So it's only been 2 months, and we're already getting ready for the first round. Joining me on today's show, it's the host of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast, Damian Parson, who's also with the Draft Network. Great work over there. Damian, thanks so much for joining the show, man.
Hey, man, no problem at all. I'm glad you reached out to have me on, bro.
For sure, for sure. You've been grinding over at Locked On NFL Draft. It's been awesome to, see you covering all the content, prospects on offense and defense. Damian, what do you think about, I was talking about this in segment 1, just my thoughts on the overall strength of the class, where it's deeper, where it's thinner. What do you think about this class as a whole compared to perhaps the last few years?
I mean, I think it's a good class. You got some positions like cornerback, early on, especially offensive tackle, edge rusher that has good depth and talent, and the talent pool is plentiful. I think this class in general has a lot of developmental prospects where we haven't seen the best of a lot of these guys yet. And where you look at some previous classes where, like, you look at the edge class, like, oh man, the Nick Bosa's and different guys like that, where that technically they are who they are, right? They're already above being a college prospect with their hands. And Aiden Hutchinson last year, same thing, right? Technicians. Then you look at this edge class, there's a lot of physical, toolsy, talented guys that, because of how college coaches coach and the main priority is, hey, just go get in the backfield. They don't teach a lot of the Tyree Wilsons of the world, right? The Derek Halls of the world, those type of guys.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys like that in this edge class that if you can get them to, they're 2 years away, in my opinion, from being potentially all 3 down type of players in terms of having that 8 to 10 to 12 sack years consistently. So I think it's a good group. It's just a lot of talent that has, I feel like the potential's untapped, and it's just like NFL coaches just have to do their job to get them where they need to be.
Yeah, so are you saying it's more of maybe a lower floor kind of class, but a higher ceiling class than the last few years?
Yeah, especially in certain spots for sure. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you look at receiver is deep in terms of the amount of bodies and names there,
right?
But there are not a lot of wide receiver 1 types in this class, right?
Sure,
Traditionally, at least, right? There's no Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle and all those guys, but most classes don't have those guys anyway. So, you know what I mean? That was kind of a one-off, but this class, the receiver position, is a good group. You got maybe 1 to 2 true potential wide receiver 1s, and the rest are wide receiver 2s and 3s. And when your teams like the Eagles or some of these other teams that already have essentially 1 to 2 wide receiver 1s, and you need that third guy or that third or fourth guy, this is a good class for you.
Damian, I know you mentioned edge rusher and cornerback maybe as some of the stronger, deeper positions here that also have some star talent on day 1. When it comes to the weaker spots, you mentioned receiver. I agree with you. I don't know if there's like a slam dunk wide receiver 1, a Devontae Smith that's coming out of this class. Are there any other spots that you say might be a little bit thinner, at least at the top of the rounds?
Man, interior defensive tackle to me. Interior defensive line is Jalen Carter. And then there's a drop, and there's a deep drop. And for me, I don't even view a Tyree Wilson as an edge. I view him as more of a 3-tech interior defensive lineman. And even with him, there's a clear drop from Jalen Carter to him, because Carter's such a game-wrecking player that, it's not, hey, well, he's got the tools. It's, man, you turn on the tape and you see it all. You see the tools, you see the physicality, the athleticism, you see the impact. And it's like, instead of projection, you know what you're getting. And then he's still not even where he could be in 3 years, because he's only a 1-year starter, as a prospect. So I think interior defensive line is one of those thinner positions at the top. Potentially, I would say interior offensive line too. I think the day 2, day 3 range is good value. But outside, there's only two. I would say maybe 2 to 3 names. Depends if you put Peter Skoronski at guard, then you got 3 or 4. But like John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota is the number 1 center for most people. But my guy, who I've been pounding the table for, is Joe Tippmann out of Wisconsin. 6'6", 315, 320, athletic, physical. He rocks the mullet. So what can't you like about the guy, right? You know what I'm saying? You don't really see too many centers rocking the Joe Dirt mullet nowadays. So, so like it's those 2 guys are really at the top, and you got like Osiris Torrance from Florida and stuff like that. But the actual top tier, or the top of that interior offensive line class, similar to the interior defensive line, is kind of slim.
Yeah, so the interior of the trenches. Gotcha. Damian, I feel like this is every year there's at least one prospect that maybe goes a little higher. I always go back to 2019 when Cleveland Farrell out of Clemson, who I liked a lot, thought he was like a mid-first round grade, went, top 5 to the Raiders? Mm-hmm. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there a prospect maybe you think we're not thinking of in that top 10 that his name could be called, and maybe not like a guy we have projected in the second round, maybe he's still a day 1 prospect like Farrell was, but suddenly he goes to 7 and you're like, whoa, I didn't see that coming.
Man, at this point, I don't think there's any in that regard, but I would say Lucas Van Ness from Iowa is the guy that, where in terms of like you watch the tape, you see some potential with him. Mm-hmm. This is a young man that was not planned on playing on the edge this year. He played more interior defensive line previously. And you see that with the way that he rushes, it's all power, 2-handed bull rush, dip the head and drive, try to drive and close the pocket. He doesn't have a plan at the apex of his rush to know, hey, 2-3 steps in, I've already created the surge. Now let me disengage and let me get the sack. So that part is something that it gives you some hope that he can create that penetration and create that surge, but there's got to be other ways to do it. And, I just see a young man that's extremely raw with his overall process from a mental standpoint, rushing off the edge, and then from a technical and hand standpoint. So it's one of those situations like when Cleveland Farrell came out the board, I was with you. I had a mid-round grade on a mid to late first round, and I was like, man, this seems like a reach. And unfortunately, I feel the same way. A team potentially will reach for Lucas Van Ness, and I don't know if the investment, the ROI on the investment is going to be a high one.
Yeah, Damian, I tell me if I'm wrong here. And I like the versatility. I like when a defensive lineman can play inside and out. I mean, Brandon Graham, the Eagles edge rusher, played at the 3-tech when he sacked Tom Brady to force the fumble and win the Super Bowl. But with Van Ness, it's almost like, do I trust him full-time on the edge or inside? That's almost the versatility scares me a little bit.
Yeah, it creates that tweener type of vibe where you're just like, I don't know where to play him yet.
Yeah,
and it's like you got to even go back to 2021, see how he truly handled the run game on the inside, because that's what things is different from college to the NFL. You get inside, you get reduced inside the NFL with these big grown men. And it's not, hey, I can just power my way and hold up at the point of attack.
You're not going to bull rush Landon Dickerson every play.
No, you know what I mean? Even the guy, even your former, I think he's retired now. Even the Brandon Brooks in his prime when he was healthy, physical, a guy that could literally move bodies off the line of scrimmage. You look at all these guys, the Jason Kelce's and all the guys that you have on your interior offensive line, and then around the league, the Zach Martins and all these different guys. Like these are like, it's hard to go inside and literally fight with these big grown men who are accustomed to doing it. So I do agree with you. He's a tweener that you just need to have a plan for. I think if a team drafts him and has no plan, you're already setting this kid up for failure.
Damian, so we talked about a potential prospect that could be on the rise, Lucas Van Ness, the Iowa edge rusher / defensive tackle. Maybe a guy that falls that we might be mock drafting pretty high?
Man, I would say I think Michael Mayer, man, the tight end of Notre Dame. I think Michael Mayer is a guy that's a candidate that we could see fall down the boards. You know what I mean? Yeah. Even if it's to the back end of the first round to a Cincinnati Bengals, right? Mm-hmm. But this was a guy that was mocked top 10, all the way throughout the season. Like a guy that, from the summer. Yeah. He was tight end 1 consensus. But, and I understood, listen, productive. He's best way to describe him, he's steady Eddie. He gets the job done. The comps of Jason Witten are apropos. They're right on point, in my opinion. But like you see, when I watch him, I saw a guy that creates separation at the top of his stems, that didn't maintain separation. So you need a quarterback that's going to get it out, a timing and rhythm thrower in the pocket that's going to get the ball out to him immediately when he creates that separation, because there are a lot of times where he creates it and defenders, because of his lack of athleticism and speed, are able to get back in phase. So when you got the Luke Musgrave of 6'6", 250 running 4.6, and Dalton Kincaid got the clear from on his back, and you know he's more athletic than Michael Mayer, and then you think about my guy down in Iowa, Sam Laporta, where it's like, you know, if he moves like a receiver, I comp him to Mark Andrews with the Baltimore Ravens. And shout out to Keith, my co-host over at Locked On NFL Draft. He comped Dalton Kincaid to one of your former tight ends, Zach Ertz. So I'm like, when you think about guys that could spearhead your passing offense from the tight end position, I don't feel like that's Michael Mayer. I feel like he's got to have more weapons around him to be truly effective and get the best out of him. And I feel like, talking to some scouts, they feel the same way. So I definitely could see him being one of those guys that's kind of drops towards the back end of the first round, early second potentially.
Damian, if you were an Eagles fan, the Eagles have the 10th overall pick and pick 30. And I've seen some of your mock drafts, and I like a lot of the moves that you've made for the Birds. If you were an Eagles fan at the end of day one, let's say they keep both picks, they're picking at 10 and 30. What's the ideal scenario? Like, would there be two guys that they come away with and you're saying they nailed it right there at 10 and 30?
Man, I feel like if the NFL gets cute with Jalen Carter, it's a terrible situation for them, because I feel like he falls to that 10th pick to Philly. I feel like they run that card up. Like Howie Roseman's like, man, forget all that. Let's go ahead and let's put it in. Matter of fact, forget the card. Let me call up to Roger right now while he's up there. Let him know, go ahead. This is the move we're making, because you let a blue chip player like that fall down the board, and then he doesn't have to play. He doesn't have to play the heavy snaps immediately. You still gonna have Fletcher Cox. You have Milton Williams. You have Jordan Davis, and losing Javon Hargrave, sliding him into that role, and then it's Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter going forward like their days at Georgia, right? With Nakobe Dean stacking behind them.
Rebuild that 2021 defense, man.
Just rebuild it, man. The Bulldogs of the North, man. So I think that at the 10th pick would be big. And then also coming off the board with a potential, for me, I look at safety, you know what I mean? Like a Brian Branch slipping down.
Yeah, I like that.
To be able to snatch him up. To kind of fill that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson role, because that was a pivotal piece of this defense. His ball skills, his coverage ability, be able to take the ball away and everything, and just his overall leadership and the way he played, definitely will be missing that secondary. So being able to fill in that spot with another guy who offers a very similar package in terms of skill set and ways he can be used. So I think getting a Jalen Carter and a Brian Branch, if that was the case, but if not Brian Branch, then also, like, I know some people are against the running back situation. I would 30 range is more so where I would come off the board if you go running back. And Jahmyr Gibbs, to me, man, I'm all about giving my quarterbacks all the weapons possible. And you bring in Rashad Penny, right? Be your downhill thumper. I know you do have and he was one of my guys too. 14.
Kenneth Gainwell.
Yeah, Gainwell, who does a lot of receiving things. But man, thinking about adding Jahmyr Gibbs and that explosive electric skill set to this offense with Smitty, with AJ Brown, a healthy Dallas Goedert, and that offensive line with Jalen Hurts, and you have the ability to motion him out wide at any moment against linebackers and safeties and some corners. And then it's like, you know what? I'm giving Jalen Hurts another option to get a quick option to get the ball out of his hands and just let him go work for you. So I think a Jalen Carter at 10 is a 100% home run, and either a Brian Branch or if he's off the board, because there's a chance of that, you get a Jahmyr Gibbs.
Damian, one more question for you, just because, I mean, the Eagles are set at quarterback with Jalen Hurts, but I'm always infatuated with the quarterback position. This year, I think it's a great class. I think each one of the top 4 prospects, you can even say 5 with Hendon Hooker thrown in there, offers something intriguing worth a first-round pick. How do you think this is going to shake out? Because I saw a report or a rumor today about maybe the Colts liking Will Levis over Anthony Richardson. Not what you prefer with this class, but how do you think it shakes out on day one? Who falls where?
Man, I think we get all 4 of the quarterbacks off the top 4 off the board inside the top 10 for sure.
I agree.
With the latest pick would be probably at 7 to the Las Vegas Raiders, but I think with that 3rd pick with the Cardinals shopping it, and preparing for, to really not so much rebuild, like getting a new quarterback and all that stuff, but getting as much picks as possible to get top tier talent next year for a healthy 2024 with Kyler Murray. I truly believe the Raiders may move up to 3. And I know they were trying to get up to 1, and they have 3 of the 4 guys pegged as first round picks. They have first round grades on 3 of the 4, from what I was told down in Indy. So I think all 4 come off the board in the top 10. I think the Carolina is such a hard winner. I don't know where they're going.
I don't know.
I've talked to people out there, and it's like one moment is Bryce, one moment is CJ. I've been leaning CJ this entire time, and I'm gonna stick with CJ there.
Okay.
I think CJ will be the first overall pick. I think
Young to Houston.
Yeah, what I was told in Indy is that the Houston is all in on Young. That's the guy they really want, and I think Young gets there to them, and that's where that 3 spot comes into play. If no one moves up, then it's a Will Anderson type of situation for the Cardinals and Jonathan Gannon, your former DC.
Yeah,
and then the Colts. I think the Colts are going to go. I think the Colts still go AR. I know that there's a lot of smoke about the Will Levis thing.
Yeah,
but I feel like Shane Steichen coming from your offense and him seeing firsthand what a guy like Jalen Hurts can do. And I've said this on the pod, I've said this on social media. Anthony Richardson is a bigger, faster, more explosive, and bigger arm version of Jalen Hurts, right? With a ceiling of a Josh Allen-esque type of quarterback.
Yeah.
And Shane Steichen understanding the patience it took to get Jalen Hurts where he was comfortable with that growth and just instilling that confidence that we're not going to give up on you. So I think Shane Steichen is one of those coaches that I feel like he could build that offense right around AR's skill set. So I think AR goes to Indy at 4, and then if there's no movement in terms of trades, I think Will Levis lands in Vegas behind Jimmy G. And honestly, I don't think that's a bad spot for him.
I don't think so either. Damian Parson, the host of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast, joining me today on Locked On Eagles to preview the 2023 NFL Draft. You can find his show all day, every day on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. He's also got some great content over at the Draft Network. Damian, where can they follow you on Twitter as well? Let's get your handle.
Oh, man. DP_NFL. Follow me on Twitter. I'm always tweeting away, whether it's clips, thoughts, whatever. What I'm saying? This is just what I do 24/7.
Damian, man, we appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks, dude.
Appreciate you, brother.